For the students, we are now again our practical research 2. This is module 12 in second quarter. So we are now down to our second to the last module. So we are now in our topic, which is drawing conclusions. So we are about to end our research paper. So after we have our findings, we are able to make our chapter 3. So it's now time to make our chapter 4. So while having this part here, so drawing conclusions. So your conclusions in your research will be based on the results of your study. Okay, so we'll discuss that further. So in this module, so this is our competency, draw conclusions from research findings. Okay, so after reading literature or maybe watching teleserie, we usually come up with the summary reflections and learnings gained. We often give our conclusions, so which provide a bridge to help us make the transition back to our lives. This incident is somewhat true in research paper. Our research provides a final say on the issues raised in the study. Hence, it is a big opportunity to make a good final impression and to end a positive note. So a good conclusion is considered the wrap-up of the study. Okay, it synthesizes the thoughts, demonstrates the importance of the ideas, and propels the reader to a new view of the subject. Okay, let's have this. So what is conclusion? A conclusion is intended to help the readers understand the significance of research of their lives. It summarizes the main features, contains insights from the findings, and directly answer the question posted. Okay, so these are the importance of drawing conclusions. So number 1, it provides new knowledge and insights needed to help solve the problem. And number 2, it summarizes the main points of the paper. So this is found in your chapter 4 in your research. And number 3, serves as basis for the formulation of the recommendation. Okay, because so in your research paper, I will explain later. So your recommendation also you will base that to your conclusion. Okay, so these are the tips in writing logical conclusions. So number 1, so state in a clear, concise, and brief manner. So your conclusion should be brief. Then it must be original and accurate. So you must base it only to your findings. Okay. And then it does not contain any number of measurements. Okay. So it's more on details. So no more figures. So your figures should be written in the findings. So I will give an example later based on a research paper. Then next, coincide with a number of specific findings. Okay, so if you have 5 conclusions, 5 findings, so you must also have 5 conclusions. Okay, then another, so conclusion should be based on the findings of the study. Then answer the stated problems and give judgment whether it failed or to reject the hypothesis formulated. Okay, so in your findings, you will write there if there's significant difference or relationship, significant relationship or not. So that's why you will have that in your conclusion also. Okay, let's have this. So drawing conclusions. So in order to write logical conclusions, it's important to identify the key points or ideas presented from the findings gathered. These are suggested format provided, but you are still free to formulate your own conclusion. Okay, so here are example. Okay, for descriptive studies, so our research title, the level of awareness on coronavirus disease, COVID-19, among the secondary students in Davao City. So the findings, so 90% of the secondary students are strongly aware of the coronavirus disease. Okay, so step 1, identify the keyword or the important idea in the findings. Since it's a descriptive study, the range of score with its equivalent level is our keyword. Okay, so this table here, you can find this in your chapter 2, in your research instrument. Okay, and particularly in the level of example, your variable is about COVID-19. You go back to your table in your chapter 2, then you can have these descriptives here. Okay, so since our findings is in the range of 90%, so you just look at this table. So this description level is very high. So after identifying that, so you can now have your conclusion in this format. So respondents plus descriptive level plus adjective describing the behavior or performance. Or you can have respondents plus descriptive level plus adjective describing the behavior or performance. Okay, so this is an example of the conclusion. So majority of the secondary students are very well oriented on the effects of coronavirus disease in our lives. So this is the conclusion drawn out from these findings. Okay, because it's 90%, so you can conclude that is majority of the students are well oriented on the coronavirus disease. Okay, so I hope you have an idea on how to make the good conclusion for your study. Okay, let's now go to for comparative studies. So this is our research title, that's perception of on coronavirus disease and the health practices among the secondary students in Davao City. So here's the findings. There is a significant difference in the perception of COVID-19 among the secondary students when grouped according to health practices. So that's the findings. There's a significant difference. Okay, so here's the format. So identify first the independent variable and the dependent variable. Then examine if what is the decision of the hypothesis. It is rejected or not. So let's summarize. So an independent variable here is the health practices. Dependent is the perception on COVID-19. And since in our findings, our decision is to we reject the null hypothesis since there is a significant difference. Okay. So here's the format in making your conclusions using the said design. So for findings, the decision of the null hypothesis is failed to reject. The null hypothesis use the verb does not affect. Okay, so if the hypothesis is not rejected, the null. Okay, so how to write? This is a pattern. So dependent variable plus does not affect or affect the dependent variable. Okay, for the findings where the hypothesis is rejected, so it's a format and variable affects or affect dependent variable. Okay, so here's the conclusion. Health practices affect perception on COVID-19. So here's the conclusion from these findings. Okay, there's significant difference. Okay, so I hope you get the point in writing this conclusion. Now let's go to correlational studies. So this is the title, Knowledge and Attitude Toward COVID-19 Among Healthcare Workers at District 2 Hospital in Ho Chi Minh City. The findings, there is no significant relationship between the knowledge and attitude toward COVID-19 among health workers. Okay, so let's have this. So let's identify the variables. So our variable x and variable y. So our variable here, variable x here is our knowledge, and variable y is the attitude. So let's identify the decision. It is so stated that it's failed to reject the null hypothesis because there is no significant relationship. Okay, then the direction, no significant relationship. Then this is the format. So an increase or decrease in x will not necessarily affect the increase or decrease in y, or the higher or lower the x, the higher or the lower the y. Okay, so example, we have this conclusion. An increase and decrease in knowledge in example variable x will not necessarily affect the increase or decrease in attitude in Y toward COVID-19. Okay? Or the higher or the lower the knowledge, the higher the lower the attitude toward COVID-19. Okay? So since our findings, there's no significant relationship, so we can conclude that so knowledge and attitude toward COVID-19 has no relationship to the health attitude toward COVID-19. Okay, so the knowledge and attitude toward COVID-19, okay, does not have a significant relationship to among the health workers. Okay. Okay, let's have another. So let's have this COVID-19 readiness and safety measures implementation among public schools in Davao City. So findings, there's a positive significant relationship between COVID-19 readiness and safety measures implementation among public schools in Davao City. So let's identify first our variable X and variable Y. Our variable X here is readiness. Variable Y is safety measures. So our decision here is to reject the null hypothesis because we have a positive relationship between these variables. Okay. So we can now conclude. So this is the format. An increase in X will mean that there will be an increase in Y. Okay. So since our decision is there's positive relationship, so we can conclude that an increase in COVID-19 readiness will also increase in the safety measures. Okay. So let's have this conclusion. Here's it. So an increase in readiness will mean that there will be also an increase in safety measures against COVID-19. Or you can state it in other terms, the higher the readiness, the higher the safety measures against COVID-19. Okay, so that's another way to state the conclusion. Okay, another example. So exotic animal consumption and progression of coronavirus disease in Wuhan City, China. So findings, there's a negative significant relationship between people's consumption of exotic animals and the progression of coronavirus in Wuhan City, China. So identify the variables. So variable X is exotic animal consumption. Variable Y is coronavirus disease progression. Okay, our decision here is to reject the null hypothesis since there is a significant relationship. So the direction here is negative. Okay. So for your guide, you can look at again your table in person R, especially interpreting the result of the R value. Okay, so step 2, after identifying the key points, write the conclusion using this format. So here's the format. An increase in X will mean that there will be a decrease in Y. Or the higher the X, the lower the Y. So we say it in this term because there is a negative relationship. So if one variable increases, the other variable decreases. Okay? Or vice versa. Okay, conclusion. An increase in exotic animals consumption will mean that there will be a decrease in the progression of the coronavirus in Wuhan, China City. Okay, so that is the conclusion if we have a negative relationship. So other variable, our X will increase, our Y will decrease. Okay? Or you can state another term, the higher the consumption of exotic animals, the lower the coronavirus disease. Okay? Okay, so let's have these exercises. Let's do this. So, draw logical conclusions from findings of the study given the following. So, the same as we did earlier. So, activity 1, descriptive study. So, this is the title, the level of preparedness of healthcare facilities in the Philippines on COVID-19 pandemic. So, the findings. So healthcare facilities in the Philippines are 50% prepared on COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so let's identify the range of score and skill level. Okay, so look at your table in your chapter 2. Okay, so our range of score here is at 50%. So pag we have this 50%, so we can say it is under moderate level. Okay, so what is now our conclusion? So we can have our conclusion in this format. So what should be your answer? So you can have this conclusion like this one. Just add text. So you can have healthcare. I hope you can see it on the screen. Okay. Okay, healthcare facilities in the Philippines are partially prepared on the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, so that is our conclusion. Okay, I hope you get the correct answer, or you can say it in your own words, as long as it has this similar thought or idea. Okay, so we conclude that it is partially prepared because of our finding, which is 50%. So in descriptive level, this is only moderate. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next example. So for comparative studies, so our title here is the socioeconomic status and the survival rate of COVID-19 patients. So the findings is there's no significant difference in the survival rate of COVID-19 patients when grouped according to socioeconomic status. So first, we will identify here our variables, dependent, independent, and the decision. Okay, so let's write. So here we have our, increase the font. So our dependent variable here is the socio-economic status. Okay. Then our dependent variable here is the survival rate of COVID-19 patients. Okay. Then, what is the decision of the hypothesis? So there is no significant difference. Okay. So that is our responses here. Then, so step 2, identifying the key points, write conclusion using this format. So, independent variable plus affect or doesn't affect the dependent variable. Okay, so we can now write our answer. So, using this pattern. So, socio-economic status. So, since it is no significant difference, so you can have does not affect the survival rate of COVID-19 patients. Okay, so I hope we got the correct answer. So I'll just highlight. Okay, so that is our answer. Let's have another. So for correlational studies, survival rate and mortality rate of the coronavirus disease. So the findings is there is no significant relationship between survival rate and the mortality rate of the coronavirus disease. So first, so identify again our variable x and variable y. Then we will determine the decision if it's positive or negative. Okay? Or no relationship. Okay, variable x here is the survival rate. Variable x here is the mortality rate. Okay? The decision is, now let's look at the findings. So what's our decision? Okay, need to accept the null hypothesis. So then our decision direction is, so there's no significant relationship. Okay, so we now write our conclusion. So we have here this pattern, an increase or decrease in x will not measure this y. Okay, so just look at our here. You can write this in a term. So survival rate has no relationship on the mortality rate of COVID-19. Let's have that disease. Okay, so this is our conclusion withdrawn from our findings. Okay, so I hope you got the answer. Okay, next, another example for correlational study. We have here now our title, personal hygiene and recovery rate of the coronavirus disease. So findings, so there is a positive significant relationship between personal hygiene and the recovery rate of the coronavirus disease. Okay, so let's identify the variable x. The x here is the personal hygiene. Okay, then our variable y is the recovery rate. Okay, then decision here is, so are we going to accept or reject the hypothesis? So we will reject the null hypothesis. Then which our direction is, so positive significant relationship. Okay, then we will now have our conclusion. So So since this is positive relationship, we can have our conclusion here. So have an increase in personal hygiene will also mean an increase in COVID-19 recovery rate. Okay, so that is our conclusion drawn from these findings. Because this is a positive relationship, so if other variable increase, other variable will also increase. Okay. Okay, let's have another. Okay, for correlational study again. So our is title, the prisoners amnesty and COVID-19 cases in the Philippines. So findings, there's a significant relationship between prisoners amnesty and COVID-19 cases in the Philippines. So let's identify our variable here. Our x here is the prisoners amnesty. And variable y is COVID-19 cases. Okay, then our decision here is reject the null. Okay, so reject the null hypothesis because there is a, so we have here our, so negative relationship. Okay, so based on our findings here, then we'll have now our conclusion. So we have this format, an increase in x will mean that there is a decrease in y because there's a negative relationship. So the higher the other variable, so the other variable also decrease. Okay, so higher and lower. Okay, so let's now write our conclusion. So prisoners amnesty will mean that there will be a decrease in, so our variable y is COVID-19 cases. Okay, so I hope you get the answer on formulating your conclusion. Okay, then let's remember this. So our research conclusion is the application, insights, and evaluation of the study. So the following are the important in drawing conclusion. It provides the knowledge and insights needed to help solve the problem. It summarizes the main points of the paper. Then it serves as a basis for the formulation of the recommendations. Okay, so for your exercise, you answer this so by yourselves and test ourselves. Okay, so the same as we did earlier. So just write here the range of score, skill level, the conclusion. So the same in our exercises. We have descriptive study, comparative, then correlational studies. Okay, so here's the exercises. So I'll just scroll down a little bit. So I'll maximize so you can screenshot. Okay, then so here you write your conclusion here. And also here, so for comparative study, here's the title, the findings. Then you write here your IBDV and the hypothesis. Then have here the Correlational Studies. Okay. And another Correlational Studies. Okay. So this is your activity for this module. So you answer these exercises. Okay. So I'll just discuss a little bit of how to draw conclusions based on your research findings. Okay, so this is our research paper. So this is in chapter 4. Okay, so this is how you will formulate your conclusion. So this is our findings. So this is example only. So these are findings here. So remember, in your findings, you write here the figures. Okay, so the order of your findings must be based also on your research questions. Okay, so if you have 5 research questions, so you must also have 5 conclusions. Okay, remember the order of this. So this is based on your research questions. So if your number 1 is about the level of problem solvabilities in your research questions, so your finding 1 should correspond also to this finding. Okay, so I hope you get the point. Okay, so again, your findings must also relate to your research questions. Okay, so in your research question number 1, it talks about the level of problem solving abilities. Okay, so here is the findings. So we have a problem mean of 4.688, standard deviation of 0.15, described as very high. Okay, then so since it's very high, you can have your conclusion in this form. So problem solving abilities of students and its factor obtain a very high mean. So therefore, the problem solving capabilities of students help them to be a critical thinkers and real life problem solvers. So that is our conclusion based on our finding number 1. Okay, number 2, student attitudes toward mathematics obtain an overall mean of 3.924, a standard deviation of 0.132, which was described as high. This indicates that students' attitude toward mathematics was often manifested. So for that conclusion, in this part, students' attitude towards mathematics and its factor obtain a high mean, indicating that students are willing to learn mathematics despite they are having difficulty with it. Okay, so that is our conclusion. So remember, in conclusion, there is no more figures. Okay. Okay, for number 3, findings. There was no significant difference in the problem solving skills when grouped according to gender. So based on the t-test, so we have our degrees of freedom 148, t-value is 0.389, and p-value is 0.698. So our conclusion here is gender does not affect the problem solving abilities of students. Okay, so it's very simple and brief. Okay, for number 4 conclusion, findings, there was no significant difference in problem solving skills and attitudes in mathematics when grouped according to grade level. Okay, this is based on our ANOVA. Okay, so our conclusion here is students' problem solving abilities and attitude towards mathematics in each grade level are the same. Okay, because our null hypothesis here is there is no significant difference of their abilities and attitude in mathematics when grouped according to grade level. So we can conclude that they are the same. Okay, or we can have also that grade level does not affect their problem solving abilities and attitude towards mathematics. Okay, and lastly, for our correlation, so there is no significant relationship between students' problem solving abilities and attitudes towards mathematics. So our p-value here is 0.214 and R value is 0.102. So our conclusion is, so students' problem-solving abilities does not relate with their attitude towards mathematics. Okay? Because there's no relationship. Okay? Okay, that is how you will make your conclusions on your research findings. So you base it on your findings. Okay, so again, so if you have 5 findings, yes, you will also have 5 conclusions. So the order is very important here. Okay, so your conclusion 1 will answer your findings number 1. Conclusion 2 will answer your findings number 1 and so on. Okay, so I hope you get the process in making conclusions. So if you have again questions and clarifications, you just PM me in my Facebook account. Okay, so see you in our next meeting.